Hello there, my name is Nicole Wilbur. I'm a writer and story nerd, and today we are story nerding out to Schitt's Creek. If you don't know what Schitt's Creek is, it is a sitcom created by Daniel and Eugene Levy and is currently available on Netflix, and I think they just had their finale season recently. And so in this video, I am going to be analyzing the pilot episode of Schitt's Creek through the lens of 3-act structure. And so why am I doing this? It is important to understand other writers' stories or stories that you loved to understand why they work. You can learn why those stories you love work, so you can hopefully write stories that you would also love. Why are we going to be talking about Schitt's Creek? Because I like it. Why 3-act structure? Because it is it's one of the more generic structures and it's a little more flexible. Now the one that I'm using here is from an article that I found on Readsy because I wasn't sure, like there are probably a million different ways that people break down 3-act structure, and I actually got one that's like it's 3 act 9 beats, which seems good to me. And if this isn't the 3-act structure that you're familiar with, then that's okay, all good. So in this video, I'm going to be quickly talking about what pilots need to do and what I think the goals the creators probably had when they started writing this episode. And then we're going to do a breakdown of 3-act structure and the Schitt's Creek pilot. So here we go. All right, so what are the goals of a sitcom pilot to start? That they're following the conventions of a sitcom. So a sitcom is a much shorter show, obviously it's like 20 minutes, and they're very episodic. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's also why it's easy to analyze 3-act structure in a sitcom, because most of the conflict and such in each episode is somewhat contained to each episode. So according to the articles that I've read, the way sitcoms actually make people laugh, it is through jokes, but like the jokes really come from the characters. So characters can get into zany situations or zany situations are imposed on them, but how the characters react is really what makes them funny and what makes us want to keep coming back. So therefore, in this pilot, the creators were really focused on A, making people laugh so they'd want to come back, but B, really establishing those characters, who they are, what their challenges are, what they're like, why are they going to be funny. And so it really focused on showing the characters' personalities, and the sitcom did it amazingly through their different character introductions. And by the way, if you want to see a breakdown of this, I've included my chart with the act, the beat, and the what it is in Schitt's Creek as a downloadable PDF on my website. So go click that link below and you can download it, check it out, and follow along with me. Let's go to the beginning. Act 1. Act 1 is what we call our setup, and so this can be broken down into sort of an exposition or an introduction beginning. Then there's generally an inciting incident, and then based on the Readsy article, there's plot point 1, which you could also think of kind of like a crossing the threshold moment. I should also quickly add that Schitt's Creek is about a family who is very rich and they lose everything due to tax purposes and have to move into a hotel in a very small town. It's small town Canada, although they don't actually tell you that, but that's what it is. So we start the show by seeing the big, beautiful house. There's a knock on the door and the revenue agency is there. So this is a really smart introduction to this story. Now I think a lesser person or someone who is a little less confident would have thought the revenue agency arriving and telling them, yo, we're taking all your stuff, is the inciting incident itself, and might have done the exposition as like setting up the characters in their usual world, like showing them being rich or whatever. But what's really clever about this is that we still learn a lot about the characters even though we start the ground off running. We start the ground off and we get into the Rose's house and they're losing it. All of this gives us a really good indication of the characters without us even needing like a lot of dialogue from them. So the exposition setup, even though I'd say it's only about maybe a minute of them like running around their house trying to get all their stuff together, is gorgeous. Then we come to the inciting incident, or the catalyst, which is the thing that changes the status quo and threatens to push the protagonist out of their comfort zone. Here again, we're dealing with a family, right? And one of the biggest things in a sitcom structure is that you have multiple protagonists at once. inciting incident is when the family sits down with their lawyer, who basically tells them they've been allowed to keep one asset, and that's this small town that the father, John, purchased as a joke. And that is where they need to move. They have to go there or they will be homeless. There's a bit of a question when it comes to what you could consider the crossing the threshold or the plot point 1, which is your point of no return, actually is. It could be when the lawyer says, like, hello, if you don't go to this town, you're going to be homeless, so you have no choice but to go to the town. I chose to say that the point of no return was really when the family arrived at the motel in Schitt's Creek, and they're unloading their luggage from the coach bus after they get booked in, and there's like officially no way to go back. And there's a moment where their luggage is just on the grass here, like the bus is leaving, and the mom, Moira, says, apparently in hell there is no bellman. And I think that is a really good indication of like point of no return. Their stuff is here, and it's the epic contrast between the giant house with the giant photograph of the family and then all their stuff being scattered on this lawn in this motel, I think is a really good sort of closure of Act 1. But it's an important point to remember that those different beats or whatever they are, they're really fluid, right? If you said, no, plot point 1 is actually a little bit later when they get checked in, or a little bit earlier when the lawyer says you're either going to move to this town or be homeless, I don't think you'd be wrong. So then we have Act 2. This is where we get a better idea of what the protagonist's goal is going to be for the rest of the story, and where they meet new obstacles and new characters, and where the antagonists to their goals become clear and they face obstacles. So the traditional 3-act structure, the Reedsy article at least, has this sort of separated it into 3 things again. It has it separated into rising action, where the protagonist's goal forms and they experience the first obstacles or forces of antagonism against them in their goal. The second one is the midpoint, where there's a major obstacle which threatens the goal and raises the stakes. And the third one is plot point 2, which is the protagonist, who has been reactive this whole time, decides to take steps to become proactive. We have our rising action step. This is when they are meeting all of the characters that will now populate their life. They meet Stevie, and her character introduction is brilliant, where she's incredibly sarcastic and just like dead-faced. They meet Roland, who his character introduction is also amazing, as he like pushes himself off the truck with like the belly shirts, and he looks so sloppy. Go look it up. And it's just crazy. And then we have Twyla, who's a character, the waitress at the cafe that they go to, who's all like perky and smiley. And it's excellent. So each character at this point kind of takes on and adapts a goal. Obviously, all of the characters are facing the same challenge of like, we don't want to be in this stupid small town and we lost all our money. But they each kind of get like a sub goal in this bit. Main focus of this whole pilot is on the conflict between John, the father of the Rose family, and sort of Moira, but not really Moira, like a little bit, but not really. It's really more John, and Roland Shit, who is the mayor of the town. So he becomes sort of the antagonist to John's desire to like settle in, avoid the locals. And it really becomes sort of like a power struggle. John owns the town, but Roland is the mayor. And so that whole conflict of like, who is this guy? Why is he coming in here? He's like intruding in our life. He's staying in our hotel room. We can't get him to go. All of that really kind of embodies like the new space that they're in. This family is used to being on top of everything, and now they have this person who they would definitely have regarded as inferior beforehand, commanding their life and like is responsible for all of their stuff, and who they now have to be nice to in order to succeed and do well. So that's kind of the main conflict that gets set up here. And we have the sort of like comic sketch. It reminds me of an SNL skit of like Roland not leaving this hotel room. At the same time, while we have the Roland won't leave the hotel room thing happening, we also have Alexis firm up her desire, which is she wants her boyfriend to come and pick her up. She encounters a protagonist in David, who threatens to tell their parents. She kind of pursues the goal by talking about how nice where they're staying is, which is such a lie because she hates it. But she's like, oh, this place is so charming, so cute, because she is trying to lessen the blow when she leaves her family, which tells you a lot about her character. Like, she's lying, she's trying to keep it secret that her boyfriend is coming to get her. And then you have David, and he has like a little goal of wanting a towel, or like overall just kind of like wanting to get clean in this motel that he perceives as like very dirty. And he finds an antagonist force in Stevie, who is our receptionist, and she brings on the sarcasm. So if you watch the episode or rewatch the pilot of it, that chunk is the largest chunk in the entire show. This is also the point in Save the Cat that they would maybe call the fun and games of the characters being forced to deal with this setting that they're not used to. This is really where you're seeing these rich people live in a motel and bowing down to a mayor and all of that stuff. So this is all the fun and game section. And I have yet to find a resource that does a really good job of giving you any guidance into what is in this section. I think that's partially because it's very specific to the story that you're writing. However, then we get to the midpoint, and I think the midpoint here is pretty easy to encounter. When the family gets back from lunch, they discover that they have no doors. So the midpoint obviously is where we encounter a major obstacle. It looks like we're going to fail. It threatens our goal, and it raises the stakes. The family comes back, they discover they have no doors. John loses his mind, and he like storms off. At the same time, just after John leaves, Moira realizes her diamonds are gone, and she also loses her mind. And so Moira has kind of a second, like, lowest point. That's the midpoint of the story. Then we have plot point 2, and that's described as the protagonist, who has been very reactive so far, takes steps to become proactive. This is when, in Schitt's Creek, the pilot, John realizes that Roland took the doors. He goes to the reception, he's like, Stevie, what the heck? And he realizes Roland took the doors, and he marches down the road to confront him. Then we're in Act 3, which is our sort of climax and our wrap up and reset. So there's a beat here, which is considered the pre-climax, or the dark night of the soul, or the all is lost moment, which is when, while confronting the antagonist, it seems as if the protagonist is going to lose. So for John, this is, he walks down the street and he starts talking to Roland. And the conversation between John and Roland is actually very, very interesting. It starts off with them talking about like gravel, and then John says that his son is afraid of moths and all of this stuff, and Roland is just not having it. He's being very obstinate and uncooperative. And then he's like, fine, I got mad and I took your doors. And there's just like a lot of clashing there, and like this is the conflict of these two power figures in this world, like smashing together. It's really good. But it does seem like Roland is going to, or John is going to lose for a bit there, because Roland is being super uncooperative. At the same time, I would say for Moira, who now wants to get her earrings back, she'd been kind of following along with John's line of desire for a bit here, but now she has her own, which is get my earrings. And she asks Stevie if there were any hobos or crackheads around the hotel, trying to figure out like who could be a suspect in stealing her diamonds. And she ends up accusing Stevie of stealing the diamonds. And that is a big loss. It looks like she's not going to get her earrings, because Stevie is very offended, obviously, and just walks right out. And then we have the climax. The climax is when the protagonist has to overcome whatever flaws or challenges that they have in order to defeat the antagonist and achieve their goal. They either do it and they achieve their goal, or they don't and they lose. So we have a beat, I think, for every single one of the characters here. That's sort of our climatic moment. So for John, Roland agrees to give the doors back, but he insists he's accepting an apology John didn't give. And so even though John wins, technically he's getting his doors back, he also loses because he's lost more of his power to Roland. For David, he chases Stevie down to ask for a towel, and he gets one because he earns her respect by calling her rude, which is very funny. It also is starting to establish in that climax, we're establishing a little bit of rapport between those two, which is going to grow through the series, and or at least through the rest of the season. So that's a win for David, and also some more insight into our Stevie character. Then John comes home to the motel. He sees Moira freaking out and he says the diamond earrings are in his shoe. So Moira gets her earrings back, which is a big win. And then we have, right after that, Alexis runs into the room screaming because her boyfriend broke up with her and now she is not leaving and she is stuck here. And that is a loss. She is not getting what she wanted. And there's this great moment where she comes in and she's like, oh my God, I'm not leaving. And then David turns to her. Dan Levy is the most amazing person. And he's like, so I'd like to check back in now. Like, do you still think this place is cute? And it's flawless, amazing. And then we have the denouement, or the release of tension, or the wrap up and reset. So this is an interesting one because in sitcoms, every ending of a sitcom episode is actually meant to kind of bring you back and reset you back to normal, right? So there's the difference between kind of like sitcoms and a drama, or one of them, is that you generally don't have full season conflicts or like multi-episode conflicts. There's a lot of emphasis on like each episode being somewhat on its own. The characters do evolve and change over time, but you're meant to be able to like enjoy an episode one-off and enjoy them in different orders and have it not really matter, which is why at the end of these episodes, they really bring it back to kind of like a new stasis, or we go back to our old normal. So in Schitt's Creek, in the evenings, the family reflects on the day, they say goodnight, we're back to a new stasis, the family is now stuck in Schitt's Creek, and that is the normal that every episode after this one kind of returns to at the end. I would not be the first person to say that I think the writing of Schitt's Creek is brilliant, particularly the pilot, particularly the way they've managed the character introductions so well. Still managing, even though the whole family kind of has they're all in the same situation and they all have the kind of same reaction of like shock and horror to what's going on, but they do a great job of giving them those little moments, like Alexis being in denial and like wanting to leave really badly, and David being like, just give me a towel, and Moira screaming and like wanting to preserve her diamonds, like all of those little things. And then of course you have the power struggle with John and Roland. And all of those little things really tell you a lot about their characters. And then the introductions of the characters in the new world is great because you can clearly see how the different groups are going to continue to conflict throughout the entire season/series, where these characters in the new world are so different and are so like by their personalities providing obstacles to these characters that it really sets up, oh, I want to see the interaction between David and Stevie more, and Moira and Stevie more, and like the Moira and Roland, and like all of these things. You know that these characters will continually come into conflict just kind of by their nature and their positions. So it sets things up really, really well. Again, if you want sort of a breakdown of this written down, I have a PDF of my breakdown on my website. You can click the link in the box below and go check it out. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Do you watch this show? Do you have other shows or books that you've done analysis of or a breakdown of? Which kind of structures do you use in order to plot your stories? So excited to hear from you. Thank you, and I will see you next time.